Hello, Zach.
Hey, Jeff.
How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Your room looks delightfully pink and purple.
Thank you. That's the goal. Definitely the goal.
So if you're not going to be Shadow Zach, maybe you can be Neon Zach.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was aiming for. I didn't ask for the name Shadow Zach. They just heaped it upon me because for some reason, because I do the horror stuff, I must be the shadow one. But I don't know. If you've ever played in any of the other Zach's games, he's pretty ruthless.
Rizzy. No, I've not had the opportunity. Maybe that'll happen here before too long.
Yeah, well, if you do, just don't get too attached to your character. I can
Well,
tell you
he's.
that.
I think I've been listening to the at least I listened to the first one of the Octoon Cthulhu 2D20,
Hmm.
and he seemed like he's been pretty even, pretty kind. But maybe he wants to put on a false front in front of people so that they get a false sense of of ease. And when they get into his games, and he can wait for the right moment and then just
Yeah.
kill his characters.
He's pulling punches for the camera is what he's doing. They don't call him the god of death for no reason. Okay. He's pretty ruthless. So yeah, I don't they gave me Shadow Zach, and I will gladly accept that moniker, but I prefer to go by your Neon Overlord.
Oh, I think that's reasonable. I
Yeah,
think,
sure.
yeah, I'm sure they shouldn't mind you calling them your subjects, but
There we go.
you just tell them they can short it to my liege if they can't spit all that out.
Exactly. There we go.
So Zach Zach threw you my way or
Hmm.
directed you my way. So you got a
Sure did.
Kickstarter going.
We do. Well, I do. I've been working on this with my writing partner Patrick for quite some time. And it's actually what led us to world game design and kind of, got us into this industry in the first place. Uh, Me, a little bit more so than Patrick. He was already looking for avenues in and had already done a few things on the DMs Guild when I found him. But yeah, it's basically how we got here. And it's been a long road and it's been through quite a few different iterations as we've tried to figure out what this book actually is. It's very different than what it started out as, but yeah, it's been a long road, and I'm glad to finally be here after almost 4 years in the making.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting because it's a 5e product, right?
It is. That's correct. Mhm.
So yeah, you're actually I think the first yours might be the first Kickstarter I've ever had for a 5e project.
Really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, it seems for whatever reason it seems to be predominantly dungeon crawl classics or mutant crawl classics. I don't know how it's happened, but for
Hey.
some reason that seems to be so you're the first 5e. So you started when 5e was going strong. The idea hit to
Hmm.
do this, and then about last year I think there's a little bit of concern, and
Hmm.
then there was of course January, February where it was like,
Sure.
but you made it through all those slings and arrows, and you're actually here with a Kickstarter doing fairly well.
Yeah, yeah, it's doing quite well. I'm very proud of how it's doing. So thank you. Yeah, and actually, the first thing that we really had to dodge was um, when I first got into this, and Patrick and I were working on this. I had this idea for this grim dark book supplement to fill out the space because I loved Ravenloft, but it felt a little bit PG-13 to me, and I was like, how can I go in and give this a little bit more of a R horror movie
Right.
flavor to it? And I was watching An American Werewolf in London when I got all inspired to do this, and so the book has deep roots in like horror movies, horror cinema specifically. But we started putting this together, and then I had this idea for this grim dark setting and all this stuff, and products like Night Fell and Grim Hollow just didn't exist at that time, and they weren't really making themselves known yet. That wouldn't be for about another 8 months or so. And man, when they cropped up, that really just kind of took me for a loop for a minute. And that was really the first kind of thing to dodge was, okay, well, crap.
Yeah.
That niche that I was going to fill got filled twice. Really, really, it's now packed pretty tight and it looks good. So
Right.
where do I go from here? So that was really the first big hurdle. And then speaking of, DCC and MCC, that was kind of the time when I started to discover those games, Morkborg, Mothership, started to get into some of the more indie stuff. I'd been playing Call of Cthulhu for a while, but that was really the only other thing besides D&D. And so started to look into those and get really into that kind of stuff as I was trying to figure out, or really kind of put this book on the back burner as we tried to figure out what it was, and kind of started doing some writing and creating and learning for other things for almost a whole year and just tinkered and thought. And then, yeah, we made it out the other end. And actually, we tried to launch this last year when we were still in flux of trying to figure it out. And after a few days, we just kind of had to call it and be like, we still don't have this right, and we got to pull the plug, and we've got to go.
So you're saying you didn't have you didn't feel like you had the concept defined enough that you felt
Correct.
comfortable with the Kickstarter? Not that the Kickstarter wasn't funding, but you're like, we're still don't really have a clear vision.
Right. And exactly right. Because the Kickstarter was funding, and it would have funded. That would have been one, though, that we probably would have made it by the skin of our teeth at the end, and we would have been able to make the book. But the end result was, what book would we have been making, right? And I wouldn't have felt good about that product, especially because I didn't know what it was yet. So really, it took a little while of trying to figure things out. And I was going through a lot of stuff. I was getting married, I moved, a whole bunch of stuff. So once I finally got everything settled, I was able to sit down. And it was after we had that failed Kickstarter launch, I was like, okay, first of all, let's kind of start over. Let's take some of these adventures that we have planned for this book, and why don't we just release them digitally? We'll just go through, we'll run Kickstarters for them so we can get a little bit of funding for art and editing and things like that, and layout. But let's just do them as little digital only adventures, and let's get people interested in a concept first before we just go try shoving a big hardback book in their face and saying, hey, why don't you buy this?
Right.
We know what we're doing. So that's the approach we took. And yeah, it was working pretty well. And then January happened. So
yeah,
that was it's kind of, if you're making 5e content, it was kind of like, try and get it out there as fast as you can, right? And hope for the best, and hope that, when it all comes to a head, that your product is still in the clear. And fortunately, everything worked out all right, and here we are.
Yeah, and it's I think it, what you were able to do is start, I guess, developing an audience through those Kickstarters, which I think it can be very important. I think sometimes people try and swing for the fences, and you really don't have the audience, and that's the hard part. Sometimes is developing some sort of following.
Sure. Yeah. And that was kind of part of the strategy that we had to step back and look at, right? Is we'd done nothing to really build the necessary following to market a hardback book or try and sell a hardback book to a consumer base, because it didn't exist yet. So we had to go out there, and we kind of had to grow a consumer base organically, one bite at a time, a little bit, which I guess maybe is kind of where Zac got the idea for his company name, Bite Size Gaming, because he kind of started off. I suppose, I don't know. It would be, I think that would be a clever think piece. But anyway, yeah. So we just started doing it the small bits, and January came around, so we did a double issue, and then it was like, okay, I've got to the point now where we got this first round out, and I want to finish it up. Instead of doing 2 more Kickstarters for these individual issues, let's just include them in the hardback book.
Yeah, because it's really hard to say, what's going to be the life of 5e, even though Wizards claims that it's, they're making the claims of it still being 5e. Just it's just like you don't know.
Absolutely. And not that I don't have any plans to support, you know, the Grim Weird Tales line or anything like that. I love it. Of course, I will continue to write things for it, but I've, you know, I've talked to people about this before. I've been creating for 5e for what feels like such a long time, even though I've only officially been in this industry a few years. I've been doing homebrew for it for years and years and years. And now that I've finally started to find some of these more indie games and systems that kind of click a little bit more with my vibe of like short stories and, you know, weird themes and things like that, and kind of more short form play, more Borg DCC stuff like that. Uh, I'm really interested to go and explore writing for those systems. Definitely over 5e for a little bit. So I'm glad to finally have this, you know, the culmination of all these years of work finally, you know, finally here, and we're working through it so that, you know, I can move on to some new things and explore different parts of, you know, writing for tabletop games.
Yeah, because it gets hard because it does suck up, you know, a lot of the energy, and especially, you know, with you it being delayed and wanting to get it out, I'm sure that it creates a certain amount of stress. Not maybe not like stress, but still it's a burden that is added.
It is, yeah. It's kind of just like there's this mountain. You're trying to drive around and see the other sites and see what else is there, but there's this big mountain that's always in your way, just kind of blocking your view. And until you can clear it away, you know, you can't really do anything else. So I've just kind of been in a holding pattern. And not that I haven't been writing and, you know, making small forays into other things in preparation, but I'll be really glad. And the big thing too is that when I first went into this big book is I thought that I wanted to do a lot of design work for tabletop games, because that's primarily, I did a lot of design work at homebrewing, you know, running my own games as a DM for all those years. But that's not what I want to do as a job in terms of in this industry. Not that I don't like it. I do enjoy doing it situationally, but I don't want to sit down and create an entire bestiary of monsters, or, you know, create an entire rules supplement for something. I want to sit down and I'm the guy, I want to write adventures. You know, I will give you chapters of adventures. I will create a couple monsters for it, you know, spot fill here and there, but I have stories to tell, and creating these, you know, these dense books filled with different options and things are interesting, and I love to contribute to things like that. But I found that setting out to do that, and doing it, it's not necessarily what I want to continue doing. And I've very much fallen in love with telling more the smaller stories
Yeah, I
for the
think
smaller
too,
systems.
you know, it's when you, and then I wonder if it also has to do with, I don't know if it has also to do with age, because I used to be much more interested in system stuff as well. But I think also, you know, what you're dealing with is you transition to doing more and more time of doing this thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like any activity. Like maybe it's fun to do a couple hours a week or a handful of hours a week, but do you want to do 8 hours a day? Maybe not.
Right.
Or 8 hours a week? Maybe not. Like,
Right.
you know, it's kind of a, you know, sometimes I think, you know, kind of reflecting what my next stage of life will be, you know, like, do I want to go and, you know, do what I'm doing for a hobby full time?
Mm-hmm.
But do I really want to spend 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, 6.5 days a week doing that? Maybe,
Right.
maybe not. I don't know.
A hard question to answer.
Yeah, it's like, you know, maybe, you know, my job's a slog, so this is a nice you know, a nice diversion. But like you, it's like, you know, okay, you know, does this mean that, you know, with all the things I want to do, am I going to have to be writing, you know, basically a bestiary every few months, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
such and such every few months? But I think similar type thing here. It's like, you know, that activity. It's like, you're right, it is fun, but maybe it fits a creative itch, but not something you want to keep scratching, or it's going to be an irritation.
Right. Exactly. And you know, some people out there, they love design work. It's the opposite for them, right? Like my writing partner Patrick, he loves doing mechanics, he loves creating monsters, he loves doing the stat blocks and all the crunchy parts of it. And that's why we were able to kind of work so well together for so long. And we had other collaborators. Zach came in and helped create a bunch of subclasses. He wrote a class for the book and everything like that. But it was really just everyone has their own kinds of things that they love to do. Like your products, right? They are You have something specific that you want to get out, like Fane of the Fly God. It's this setting and everything that encompasses, or with Scoundrels, it's these options for sci-fi stuff.
Right.
And that's the kind of stuff that I'm interested in. Like if I'm gonna make a supplement, I want it to be geared towards something, and I want it to be tight. I don't want to go create these big, like, this book is great that we've created. But I'm not sure I want to go this big again. You know what I mean? It's a
Oh
lot to
yeah.
it's a lot to think about. It's a
It
lot of
is.
moving parts.
It is. Well, I think too, it's like, and that's where it is, like, and that's where it can be the point where, the next thing is maybe you want to do something big again, but you're going to have to say, but I need another person on board
Right.
who's going to do something that you or Patrick's not good at.
Sure. Well, and here's what it really is. I think it's not that I'm opposed to doing big books or hardback books or anything like that again in the future. It's that I think that I should approach it the same way that I've learned to approach the novel, which I've never written a novel and I have attempted it several times. And the reason my approach to novels now is that I used to sit down and set out to try and write a novel, and that's why I failed every single time. And the reason I succeeded at writing poetry and short story is because that's what I set out to write a short story or a poem, and I succeeded because that's what I could do. And I feel like for me, a novel is something that's going to have to grow organically out of me. I can't
Right.
just sit, I don't have the brain to just sit down and put together a novel like some writers can. It's not that I'm incapable of it, but it's something that I'm going to have a short story that I just can't stop. And I think if I ever get to the place where I have to write another book that is this big and this dense and this filled with options and things like that, it's going to have to grow organically. It's not going to be me sitting down and going, well, what is the space missing and where can I force my way into the industry and, try and make a splash? It feels better to just try and let it grow by itself, I think.
Well, I think too is, and maybe we'll get more into your GrymWyrd omnibus, but I think also too, it's like, are you creating something that's supposed to take characters from point A to point B, but now going to a larger scope? Now it's from point A to point, E.
Mm-hmm.
Because that really changes this, like the scope and the complexity and the number of beats. I mean, where you say, you know what, I got this image in my head, I got an idea, and this would be great for 2 or 3 sessions.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't want to say, but you don't want to deal with a campaign, and that's
Right.
a different way of thinking.
Yes, absolutely.
And you can take all these little pieces and put them together and say, well, that's a campaign, but unless you really know what you're doing, it's really not. It's just a bunch of things that you try and find some sort of hook to hook them all together. But even so, if they're run consecutively, you don't know what people are going to. You kind of have to railroad it more. I think for longer ones, shorter ones, you don't really care. You don't have to
Right.
railroad it. You play to see what happens.
Exactly. And that's what I like about it, and I think it, I think back to actually playing games too. It's like, when you're running it as a DM, you don't how many times have you ever sat down to railroad your characters and that actually worked out, that you not not that, there's not a reason to have these books, but I've picked up a lot of great things just sitting around and chatting with you guys over the last year at these conventions and online and things like that. And it's just been great to get some of this feedback. And it was talking to Tim and you and some of the other guys at Gamehole last year where I really kind of picked up on that, let things grow organically. And I kind of sat back and looked at, like, yeah, I really had been setting out to do things with a certain intent that really, it's like, when I really should have just been letting things happen a little bit more naturally and just been recognizing what I had to offer instead of trying to, force my way into to say something that just because I thought it needed to be said.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that is good. That's a good point, and that's hard, especially going into the right. And it's hard coming into something when you're starting new, because this is, I mean, you started, without really any professional background. Like I didn't have any professional background,
right.
and you kind of have ideas of what you think you should be doing. You know what you
Mhm.
kind of like to do, and you're just trying to make something successful, but you really don't know what you're doing.
Right.
It's like kind of do something, you just kind of close your eye, like, ooh, will it fun? Will it fun? It did. Okay, I guess I'm doing something.
But the cool thing is that I found, and this was really interesting because coming into this industry, I'd kind of grown into quite the introvert. But what I think the cool thing is yeah, you shut your eyes and you kind of hope, but you've got all these people around you that are like holding on to you and they got you. Because I
Yeah.
mean, man, this community inside this industry, just the group of indie creators, especially, kind of this vast web of network of people that we kind of all know together. It's got some great people in it. A lot of really cool people, a lot of interesting and creative people with some really, really awesome ideas. And I just love how we all kind of support and, support each other and have each other's back like that. I think that's really awesome.
And with Zach, what I find kind of funny about Zach is he's, I mean, I don't know for sure, but he appears to be one of the busiest people I know.
He never stops.
And I'm thinking like he's not, you guys have that they have that the podcast like Geeks Can't, like
Yeah.
at least a couple times a week something's going on,
Hmm.
and I don't hear from him at times, and times I do, it's like, messages at like 1 a.m, and then I'll be doing, be like, hey, I need an article for Gary's pension. Yep, I got it. Oh, you need some more? I got it. It's like, I'm thinking, how in the world does he find time? But I think the thing is, people are passionate.
Hmm.
It's like we're all in this journey that we could be making more money if we just spent all the hours that we're putting into it into something else. Because it's not a great return on time. The pay isn't. So
Yep. We're all working on getting there though, right? That's the goal.
yeah, just making enough to get by. So that's all we
Make
really
enough
need.
to yeah, make enough to get by and buy each other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a transfer of goods to from one person to another and back again. So
Exactly.
yeah, it is kind of interesting. And you're right, it is a phenomenal group. And I think anybody that so when I'm not talked to Skeeter Green, but I guess years ago, according to him, I guess I should be careful. But anyway, the I guess the scene really wasn't quite as open and friendly.
Hmm.
So I don't know if the zine craze and the people that kind of poured in from that, if that kind of created an atmosphere of more camaraderie. But
I would think that might lend a fair bit. Just everything that I know from like the indie scene and like the zine scene, really, and kind of how Exalted Funeral got started and all that kind of stuff. Really interesting. There was just a whole lot of camaraderie and things that went along with that, and really, and I was not even in the hobby back at this time, but I've read some stuff about it. The like the homemade zine craze, like back in the early 2000s, that everyone was doing, and all that kind of stuff online, mailing, creating your own zines, like with glue and like paper and stuff, and mailing them snail mail across the country to each other because it's still like 2004.
right.
That's crazy. That's so cool. So yeah, I think that there's always been, like, since at least since the early 2000s, just like a really intense, uh, like tight packed community of like passionate indie creators, just around tabletop games in general, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I would say, anybody listening, even considering going into producing their own work, just there's a lot of people to ask around, because I think I found, it's everybody's more than happy to lend advice to other people, and whether
Mm-hmm.
it's through the Facebook forums, like through the zine RPG zines, or just people meet at conventions or whatever, just hit people up.
Absolutely.
Everybody's happy to. It's kind of funny because the hobby just grows. I mean, that's what happens when you're with enthusiasts. I mean, they're wanting to see it grow.
Sure, absolutely. And that's, I attribute my buddy to, kind of talking me into doing this, because I kind of started writing out this campaign based on American Werewolf in London, and none of my players could play. And one of them was like, well, if you really love it so much, why don't you turn it into a campaign? Or why don't you turn it into a book and sell it? And I was like, you can't do that. And he was like, sure you can. I was like, you can't do that. And he was like, there's a thing called the SRD and the OGL, and you absolutely can, as long as you abide by those, you can go write your own D&D stuff and publish it and sell it. And if you really love this werewolf thing that you've written so much, go do that. And I was like, oh, interesting. So I went and I looked into it, and I just kind of thought, okay, that's interesting hobby. Because, I was working full-time gig in construction management back at the time. So,
That's not
but
stressful.
no, not at all. It's not. Oh, never again. But it was actually, and that was a good push, but it was actually my wife who, at the time, we just started dating, and she looked at me and she's like, look, I like you. You're a nice guy. You're an interesting guy, but I care nothing about all this nerdy stuff that you talk about. But I really like you. So if I'm gonna listen to you talk about it, you need to go make money from it. She told me, she said, go monetize that geek. And I said, okay. And that was really the push. And I was like, huh, that's an interesting thought. I was like, I never thought that I could make money doing this. I was like, maybe I could. And so I started thinking about it that way. And that's, here we are.
It's, if you just think what would happen if more of the significant others looked and said, you know what, you need to make money off this. I give you my blessing, but you better be making some money off this.
Yeah.
What kind of different world this would be? Maybe there'd be more movies, maybe there'd be more music, maybe there'd be more all
Yeah.
sorts of other things.
Yeah. My wife was like, I do not like this. And I do not want to listen to you talk about this unless you are making money from it. Then I will listen to you talk about it all day long.
Yeah, in general, I hate to generalize, but women and nest eggs seem to,
yes,
it's something they like.
Yes. Well, and my, not to divulge too much, but even back then, my wife made more money than I do. So, she's just very pragmatic is her thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I find it. I think at least my wife is much more sensitive to cash flow. So
yeah.
So for her, like as long as things are flowing one direction, she's happy. So
yeah, exactly.
So
now, if I
ahead.
come in and started talking about psychology and sociology and nutrition and dieting and all that stuff, she'd have been more than happy to just let me talk about that without any further ado.
That's funny. But so American Werewolf in London. So how's GrymWyrd how's that grown from the American Werewolf in London?
Sure. Let me get myself a fresh drink real quick. But so yeah, the initial campaign that I kind of wrote that I was then going to turn into a book, which then became a hard, whatever this project was that ended up being GrymWyrd Tales, was inspired by An American Werewolf in London, that original little short campaign. And then as I started to grow it into a book, I started taking more cues from other horror movies and horror cinema and things like that.
Well,
that
let's
I
go
really
back.
love.
So you saw a movie. Let's say it back to the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So you watched American Werewolf in London.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, man, this is a great movie.
Yes.
And you're like, I got some ideas of how to take this into and make it into a story. So what sort of like, I mean, how did, like, not necessarily beat by beat, but like, obviously, for anybody that's seen that, it's not obvious that there's a D&D campaign in An American Werewolf from London.
Sure. So what I was very interested in was I was very interested in the vibe of the werewolf. I was interested in the transfer of lycanthropy and the depiction of the werewolf. I love the the way that Jack is depicted as coming back and kind of haunting David throughout the
Yeah,
movie.
yes.
Just everything that goes on, just the whole psychological aspect to that movie. And then, of course, there's a slaughter rams in, and the whole scene on the moors in the beginning, and that's just so thematic. It's just there's so much to that. And I was just like, okay, first of all, I want to create a little area that is just, that is just a great ode to Scottish moors. I want to create my own little take on the ram's head, and I want to do something with playing up this, like, if you are killed by a werewolf, what happens? You become some sort of lingering, like, manifestation of that trauma. And so I was working out a way to bring those elements of fear and dread into the campaign, and it ended up being uh like almost like I wanted to end up creating almost like an additional kind of like an exhaustion mechanic, almost like an additional kind of condition to create dread and terror, that would be optional and not too in the way, that would feel like it naturally fit. And I could never crack that. Troy Sandlin actually helped with that, because I could never quite figure it out. But it does exist in the GrymWyrd Omnibus in its final form. Carried it all the way through from the very beginning there. But yeah, it was kind of Jack haunting him, and that whole psychological aspect of, when you go back and you watch the old black and white 40s and 50s monster movies and the Wolfman movies and things like that, which were my favorites growing up. They're all those movies, as great as they are, they lack a certain psychological element. They're
Oh
very
yeah.
straightforward. Um, and so it was really just kind of thinking for the first time, like, because that was probably my 50th time watching An American Werewolf in London, but it was the first time I'd ever thought, what if I could take that psychological element and put it into D&D? And I was like, how would I take that? Because I'd run horror for D&D so many times, but it always felt so dry. Even Ravenloft, like it, and by dry, I mean it just felt so PG-13. Like there's this barrier that you're just never allowed to cross, this of horror that you just can't really ever go through. And I was like, how can I reach through that barrier in and make something truly scary for the players? And so that's what I set out to do. Not make them uncomfortable, mind you, not
Right.
cross boundaries or cross lines, but to actually scare the players. Because when you go into watch a horror movie, you're giving consent to that movie to let it cross a few lines that you're comfortable with. And if it goes beyond that, you might get up and walk out of the theater or turn it off. And you have that option. Just as, in a game, you always have the option to tell the DM, hey, I'm not comfortable with this. But my goal was to set out and kind of make people squirm a little bit, because Ravenloft doesn't make me squirm at all. No offense. It's fun. I love it. It's beautifully written. It's got fascinating characters. It's great horror fantasy, but it doesn't make me squirm.
Well, and I haven't played. I mean, I played the original Ravenloft, like back in the day, but I think we played a little bit. But I think in general, I think D&D doesn't lend itself well, because the idea is being heroic characters in that environment, and it takes
Mm-hmm.
away a certain feeling of helplessness or vulnerability.
It does, you're right. And so that was really tricky. And then Night Fell and Grim Hollow came along. They had their settings, because originally I was going to create a whole setting. I had a map and all these locations. I had this and that. It was dense. But then I had to just basically look at it and admit that not only had they beaten me to the punch, they did what I was doing way better than I was doing it. And so ultimately, my goal was no longer to make people squirm. My goal was to just make this book as authentic as I could truly make it, which is, how do I lend my voice to horror in D&D? And what does that look like? And how do I just say what Zach wants to say to horror
Right.
and D&D, and that ultimately turned out, and that's where GrymWyrd came from. It's when I was honest with myself. It's like, okay, what do I really want to say? Well, I really like psychedelic stuff. I really like strange. Like, I really wish you could just take Lewis Carroll and H.P. Lovecraft and William Blake and you know, some of these guys and just throw them all in a big 1980s B movie blender together and throw an extra dose of LSD in there and then see what comes out in the end. You know, what is that going to look like? I was like, that's what I want to write. And I, you know, that sounds fun. And so, you know, it's like, how can I take movies like The Wolfman and mix it with something like Brain Damage and Midsommar and Children of the Corn and spit out something really unique and interesting. So that's where kind of like all this ode to cinema comes. I do steal bits and pieces from, you know, great, you know, authors and legends, some of them racist. But really the backbone of each of the GrymWyrd tales that I've written was like, how can I go in and take, you know, this movie like I did with An American Werewolf in London, and I kind of take them in and I remix them with other movies, especially of other genres, and find ways that I can take supernatural horror and blend it with cosmic horror and blend it with a little bit more of like maybe demonic
Well,
horror.
because I think what you're doing, you're not saying like I'm going to take an Avengers movie and just make it into a D&D movie
Right.
or D&D campaign, and I'm going to create an analog to, you know, this is the beginning and this fight represents this and this fight represents that, and them going, you know, like you could probably, if you really want to be a manager, you probably could take an Avengers movie and make it into a D&D campaign in some way. I don't know.
Sure.
I'm just throwing this out there. But I think what you're saying is, I love this movie. There are things about this movie. I like the way this feels. I like a couple of these scenes because they make me feel a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to provide a game setting where that provides those feelings and those, and maybe have some of those set pieces, but you're not saying this is not going to be, you know, a conversion of a movie into a campaign.
Right, exactly. And not even really, I don't even think of it as a campaign basis as much as like an adventure basis. I will take, when I go and I sit down to write one of these GrymWyrd adventures, which we've got 4 of them already written for the book and already published. You know, I will sit down and I'll take a handful of movies that I'm inspired by or that I think might be interesting to kind of remix together, and I'll go back and I'll watch them and I'll take notes and I'll, you know, if it doesn't work, I'll keep looking. But I'll go through and I'll pick things that don't really fit together or seem like they wouldn't fit together, and I'll find ways to kind of, like for instance, did you see the movie Nope?
I just watched it. I think we watched about a month ago.
Okay, excellent. So I don't want to, I'm not going to give away any spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it, who may be listening, but that movie is a great example of like what I would say is how I like to take and remix things for a GrymWyrd tale. Is there are great homages to The Exorcist, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Jaws, you know, all kinds of different references in that movie. And it is a movie about an, you know, about an alien, you know, about a predator alien. So you can see where those kind of come in, and then the thing with the house, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so there's some, you take them and you take these kind of vibes and you think, how can I spin that, take that feeling and do something new and different with it, and create a scenario where something completely bonkers is happening, bizarre, gonzo, you know, and freaky. And you know, there's just one shot, 1-2 shot. Doesn't have to be super long, and just take homage from a couple different movies and wrap it up in something like that.
Yeah, I watched it, and then my wife kind of had a theory about some things, and I was watched it, and I was thinking about this, right? Like, what exactly do they mean by this, or what's intended by that? And so I ended up looking online, and somebody explained the different ways to look at it, but they said, but in the end, what Jordan Peele said he was making was he's making a summer horror movie.
There you go.
And then, you know, you can, there are definitely some points he was trying to make, but it was political without being political. It was just a
Sure.
fun action movie. It threw all sorts of stuff in there, all sorts of vibes. There's some weird stuff from the previews. I had made assumptions,
Hmm.
and then then I watched the movie, and and so, like, for instance, there's a woman in the audience. I thought she was dead, an undead.
Right.
But then when I saw the movie, I'm like, no, this is far more terrifying.
It's
This is more
far worse.
horrible.
So much worse than you think. Oh man. Yeah. Yeah, stuff like that. And sometimes, yeah, exactly. Just but at the end of the day, he just set out to make a summer horror movie. And sometimes at the end of the day, all I want with my adventures is for people to imagine jelly covered puppets
Yeah, there you go.
when they're playing, you know?
But I think the thing is, you could take different things, you can throw different themes, you could even if you want to throw in some politics, if it's not even like beating people over the head with it, and you just
Sure.
throw it all together, and it makes for a good time. Like,
It is. It's a ton of fun. And that's why I don't specifically use 80s horror movies, but that's why I use them quite a bit more than some of the others maybe. In terms of like the GrymWyrd tales, is because they're literally, some of them are just there just to be just ridiculous. Like they just are bonkers, and just it's just sit down, turn your brain off for a minute, watch this. There's no underlying message to this movie. It's
yeah.
just it's here, you're here to watch some weird stuff. And
Toxic Avenger is a Toxic Avenger. I've never seen
exactly.
it, but it's
Yeah, yeah. Critters is critters. You're not gonna get a whole lot of subtext out of that movie.
yeah, it's about the alienation of the modern male in
Yeah.
context of a civilization that seems to be going against his mores.
Let us dissect killer clowns of outer space on an intellectual level.
Yeah, that's fun. So it is a so GrymWyrd is a setting, but with a series of adventures, or are they adventures that, when played together, they fill out a setting?
A little bit of the latter, more so of the latter. It's a series of adventures. There are some player options. There's a quite a large bestiary in the back. There are a few new optional mechanics, like new uh, mechanics for possession, because I was really dissatisfied that really the limitations on, going full Reagan with the pea soup in 5e. There's not a whole lot to make that fun and engaging, and really trying to suck demons out of people. So we did that. And it's mostly just a toolkit that people then can use to borrow from and take small pieces or large chunks and add it into their Ravenloft campaign, or their Grim Hollow campaign, or their Nightfell campaign, or whichever horror themed campaign it is that they're playing. If they want to add a dose of like gonzo weird horror, that still fits with a kind of a grim vibe at the same time, that clings to the grim just enough, but adds enough gonzo to kind of shake things up and maybe give that one adventure a little bit of a different flavor, or that new race a little bit of a weirder vibe. Well, that this would be the book for that.
Okay. Okay, so you're not creating a setting in any sense. It's really meant to be supplemental to whatever it is that people are playing or
Absolutely.
running.
100%.
Okay, that makes sense. And the omnibus, because it's a collection of, even though some of it's new.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
But I
Some
guess
of it,
it's all new, isn't it? Or is it?
well, the first four adventures that will be in the book have already been published digitally, but this is the first time they will be in print. And then
Ah,
the other two adventures, the other two GrymWyrd tales, are brand new. And then some of the unsettling scenarios and other things like that are brand new. However, a whole lot of this content, it's the first time it will have ever been printed or published, but it has been in the works for a very long time.
well, that's good. So I guess, and I haven't looked. Are you doing any sort of virtual tabletop support for this?
How do you mean?
Is there going to be like tokens or maps or things like that?
Oh, sure, sure, absolutely. So there will be VTT maps for and tokens for every adventure, and then we will probably look at doing tokens for all of the monsters as well.
Yeah, I just never really thought about that. I've so far I've have not had any adventures, published any adventures. So then I just thought, and that's the thing too. It's like if you were to do a, go even further and make it a Roll20 release, but then, with the difficulty of some of these things are a Foundry, then it's the support of stuff afterwards. But if really all you're offering is maps and tokens, most people are happy with that, and you don't also have to be spending your time supporting it for 20 years.
Right. And we do that pretty much just as a default, sometimes you'll see people who, offer that as upgrades, but because it does take time, especially if you're just like a one-person team. I understand why you would offer a stretch goal or even a small team, but we have someone, Zach knows how to knock out those tokens in like half a second.
Yeah, they got some online stuff that works pretty well, but it's just or you can, if you're savvy enough, you can I'm sure do with other tools, but it just it takes time. But yeah, I'm always leery. In fact, the last Kickstarter, somebody's remarked on the Facebook ads. Oh, speaking of Facebook ads, I just don't want to talk about.
Sure.
Like what? No, not milestones. I forgot the term.
Stretch goal.
No stretch goals. I'm like, no, it's like I'm done. It's just done. It's ready to go. I don't need I don't need to add one more thing to create another level of complexity. But I think what you do with the stretch goals with the tokens and the electronic maps is it really doesn't cost you any time or any money to really do that. So that would make sense for a stretch goal, I think.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, oh, I want to bring on, because I know a guy brought on unlocked a bunch of additional writers. Now he's gonna get those people to write.
Yeah. Well, I mean, well, see, for me, the fortunate thing is that I've got Andrew Hindenburg, who is one of my stretch goal writers, who he also works for World of Game Design. So that one is at least guaranteed.
Yes. Thus Seth Jared, get it done.
Yes. Be like, okay, I need this one. So yeah, we've got a couple of guest writers coming on to do some of the unsettling scenarios, which I'm looking forward to. Levi Combs might be writing one for us if we hit that stretch goal. Frank Tedeschi might be writing one for us if we hit that stretch goal. He did Bleak Sprout. If you've ever checked that out, that's an interesting little book. And he's writing with me on GrymWyrd Tales #6. He and I are kind of co-writing that one together, which is kind of took inspiration from the Blair Witch Project. The Ritual, if you've ever seen that, it's on Netflix. It's a great movie based off of a book by Adam Neville, one of my favorite folk horror authors. And then also Annihilation, which horrible sci-fi film, great cosmic horror film. I was very confused the first time I went to go see that film. The marketing was terrible.
Oh, for Annihilation.
Yeah. I thought I was going to see a sci-fi film, and I walked out of that movie going, what did I just watch? And then I watched it again a couple weeks later, and I was like, oh, it's a horror movie.
Yeah, it's so where I did some reading on that actually, and it was kind of I think the intent was it was like a metaphor for cancer.
I could see that for sure.
And how it's like it's you, but it's not you. It's got your cells, but it's not you. It's alien, but it's not. It's and how it changed, and so anyway, kind of, that was kind of an interesting take on that. But yeah, you're right. This is no like pew pew pew. You end up watching this like I didn't really like the way that fully ended. But
sure.
They always the hand coming out of the water kind of stuff. I hate that. Yeah. But yeah, it definitely was one of those things you're then watching like, what did I just see?
Yeah. Like what? And that's the kind of subtext I do kind of enjoy, though. Like you were talking about, like I'd never read that about the cancer, but that's fascinating because again, that movie, when I first watched it, all the marketing made it seem like it was a sci-fi movie. And I got done with that movie. I was like, that was a terrible sci-fi movie. It was very disturbing. But it was not a good sci-fi movie. And then when I watched it again, I was like, it gave me serious color out of space vibes when I went back and watched it again. And when I watched it under the lens of a cosmic horror movie, it was like, this is very, very good. And especially now that you're adding that extra layer of subtext with cancer, now I have to go back and watch it again, especially as I'm writing this sixth GrymWyrd tale that's kind of incorporating elements of it, because that's interesting. That's an interesting take.
Yeah, and again, I don't know if that's the actual thing that was stated, but
I don't care.
Yeah, but
said
you kind of go through that, and I think going in, it would seem kind of like Predator, where he had your action gal, the Marine type, and let's go shoot his stuff up, and then it's just like, wow, this is just getting strange.
Yeah, it got real strange. I was like, it was somewhere around the scene with the bear where I was like in the house, and I was like, this is not a sci-fi movie at all. I feel like I want to pee in my pants. And it takes a lot for a movie to scare me. That scene was legitimately like really, really scary for me. And I don't scare easy, but that was just so, oh, that noise, and it's not okay.
Well, and I think even the fauna was changing.
Yeah, that
And
was so cool.
yeah, so it's like it's like, I guess in some ways kind of like Uncanny Valley, in a way that maybe not really Uncanny Valley, but it's not like real weird. It's still close, but it's not, and that's where I think sometimes things can get kind of a little difficult.
Yeah.
So you guys have stretch goals. You got people writing. I should have. I didn't look at this ahead of time. So I'm trying to look at.
No worries.
So I'm trying to. He's got a lot of stuff going on here. So we got shipping. I think went too far. So what are your stretch goals for this?
So right now, we have unlocked 7 additional monsters. We've unlocked an unsettling scenario, which is the one that Andrew's going to be writing for us at 11,000. And then at $2,500, which we're about $20 away from hitting. Is that right? Let me refresh and see. We may have hit it. Nope, we're still about $20 away from hitting that $12,500 mark. And at that point, we will add a ribbon bookmark to the book, because we're not doing any deluxe or limited editions of this book or anything. We're just going to try and make the standard edition as cool as we possibly can through stretch goals. So I don't want to give too much away, but if you're listening to this now, we might be able to give away a few more, so I can talk about some that might be coming up.
Oh, that sounds good. Yeah, because you have already, by the time this is reached, I'm sure you'll be hitting 20,000.
Exactly. Or yeah, I can hope. So let's see. Coming up, we have we'll do some additional monsters. We got about eight more monsters that we can add out of a total of, I think we'll add up to a total of, I think, 30 additional monsters. Wow. Is what we agreed on. Total of new monsters that we haven't created before, that don't exist currently. We will do an additional unsettling scenario. That'll be Levi's. And then we are looking at doing another upgrade to the book at around 18,500, which is we want to do painted edges to the pages. We're not sure on the colors for the ribbon bookmark or the painted edges yet, because we haven't finalized the color scheme of the book. We're not sure if we're going to go with the red that we've used on the Kickstarter page. But we want to make sure that the ribbon bookmark and the painted edges, if we unlock both of those stretch goals, that they kind of jive with the rest of the book.
So for those people at home that have never ever priced out books, that ribbon upgrade is a huge increase the price of the book. And also, if you go with end papers other than white or maybe black, that is a huge increase to the cost of the book.
Yeah. So we wanted everyone to be able to have the opportunity to have the deluxe copy of this book on their shelf, just for backing at the physical level. So that's why we want to make it cooler by unlocking it through stretch goals. And then a little further back, where do we got it? Yeah, so next, after the ribbon bookmark, actually, we'll look at around $15,000, we'd be unlocking the first half of the Sinister Places, which, again, this isn't a setting, but there are places, towns, and certain locations mentioned in each of the adventures. And so these Sinister Places would just be a little mapless gazetteer that kind of flesh out each one of these locations, which can then just each one of these locations you could just pick one of them and pick it up and plop it right into your own campaign. It'll be fleshed out, it'll be ready to go. You don't have to do any work of coming up with all the details for this village or town or city that exists in this GrymWyrd tale. If you want to expand on it, or have your adventure extend beyond the confines of the what we've written. So this would be a way for you to expand that content, naturally, and not have to guess at, how to fill out the rest of this town that I didn't really go into much detail about in the adventure. But they won't be a cohesive setting. They won't be tied together. I'm not giving you any indications on how these places relate to one another, where they are located geographically in accordance to one another. There's not going to be a map. None of that matters. You pick them up and put them wherever you want and use them however you want.
Yeah. So the nice thing is you've got enough people that if one person or two people aren't able to fulfill, you can always switch around, and you've got enough people to be able to pivot and flex, and so that's nice.
Yeah,
Rather
absolutely.
than you and Patrick all of a sudden now you got to come up with,
Sure, absolutely. It's been very nice. And then beyond the painted edges at about the $18,500 mark, we'll see what happens beyond there. We definitely, like I said, we have some more monsters that we would be willing to create that we have not yet created. If we unlock those stretch goals, we have some more unsettling scenarios that could be written by authors and writers who definitely are looking to contribute more to this book, if they have the opportunity. So we'll see what else happens. And then, of course, we have more book upgrades. There could be some things that we could do. I'm a big fan of, obviously, neon stuff. I have black lights in here, so maybe there could be some funky stuff we could do with, making stuff glow, or, light up in fun ways, or, who knows? There's all kinds of fun book upgrades if we get up there high enough.
Yeah, and Zac has also stated that he talks about it being a journey for the Kickstarter, and I think having those things unlocking as you progress helps in that. I think it is, and it's undoubtedly a worthy thing. It's just that it's always a tricky thing depending on your project, what you're wanting to do, and what the risks are. So, but for you, it definitely keeps adding to the book. So anybody supporting this, not only are they getting more book, but they're also supporting more writers, more art is coming out, and they're getting a better product. And it's also, but you also have enough of a team behind that you can just, things can keep moving along. So it's not, there's not that much risk. Where it's just you, it's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. And one of the great things that's been such a huge boon to this project is, one, Patrick and I had, so much of this done before the word GrymWyrd had even entered the conversation. But then once that did happen, and we did these first 4 adventures, now we're looking at, this Kickstarter is going on right now, and we have probably, if not close to 90% of this book written, and it's just a matter of getting the rest of the art, getting it all through editing, getting it through layout, all those final end pieces. But in terms of like the actual text of the book, it's almost all completely done, with the exception of any stretch goals that we unlock, and just a little bit of some monster descriptions and a couple other odds and ends that need to be cleaned up here and there. But that's been a huge help, is to have that much done, especially with the 4 adventures that were already written. And that's been helpful too, in that having these 4 adventures already published kind of helps alleviate some of the costs. So, um, a lot of hardback books, especially of this quality, excuse me, going around these days start out at, at least 50, but, a lot of times you're looking at $70. And I think we're offering it for $40. So that's a pretty good deal.
You're offering a hardback for $40?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be over 200 pages.
That's crazy.
So, well, we're a little bit crazy.
You are a little bit crazy.
I want you to have it. I want everyone to be able to have a copy.
Yes, you're creating a very low barrier for people to be purchasing. In fact, even I think the PDF is only the complete package is 21, but the digital book is $10. So
yep. Right now, the just to get it through the Kickstarter, because again, we've had so many backers that already backed the first 4 issues. We didn't want to have to pass that cost on to them again. So we were like, well, let's just alleviate their cost from everyone else.
Well,
we'll eat it. So let's just make the digital as of right now. Now, when we release the book fully, the PDF will probably be $20, right? And the hardback will go up to maybe $50. But we're not going to pass that cost on to, hundreds of backers who've already backed the digital versions of these products before. So
yeah, so for the cost, right now hamburgers cost more than $10. Salads cost more than $10.
Yeah. Can confirm.
It's like maybe I'll just keep working for the rest of my life because I can't afford a hamburger.
Yeah, I can afford an RPG, but not a hamburger. Hey,
yeah, exactly.
that's a world I wouldn't be sad to live in. I make my own hamburger.
Yeah, there you go. So you guys have a lot of art. So it looks like a lot of original art that's gone into this.
Yeah, that's also been a pretty big, especially since hooking up with Wogdy, but even before, the fact that we've been working on this for 4 years, even when we weren't actively working on it, there was always time to just, have an artist, be like, hey, let's pump out a little bit more artwork for it, because we know it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. So we've had plenty of time to get quite a bit of artwork done for it as well. We need quite a bit more, and I would love to fund for more fun to be able to get some more. So that would be excellent. I'd like to be able to do at least artwork on at least every other page. And right now we're looking like that might be a good possibility. So that's excellent.
That is excellent, and that's hard.
Yeah,
it's definitely, even some of the simpler things you think are simple, they take time. And even if you get a lot, like even a small picture, it's like, well, still small pictures cost as much as a lot of times larger pictures, because they can't draw it that small. They actually have to draw bigger.
Exactly.
It's as
all
much
just
time.
a matter. The things that you learn going into tabletop games. I mean, I knew nothing about Photoshop. I knew nothing about Adobe Illustrator. I knew nothing about JPEGs or vector images or how to I knew nothing about graphic design at all. And I'm not anywhere close to a graphic designer now, but I can at least operate in those spaces, and I can understand what graphic designers are talking about. I can give notes, I can make adjustments, I can do mock-ups. That I've learned some really cool and valuable skills just by, meeting, again, networking and meeting you guys. Zach, he's been a huge help. So it's really cool.
Yeah, and I think really, especially being a person can start out taking a zine, and as you mentioned before, you can just type and paste and photocopy, or you can do a full-fledged professional looking layout or anything in between. But it's it is feasible for people to do everything on their own, and then just learn as they go too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There are some people out there who are just absolute wizards. I think you're a wizard. Oh, yeah. I couldn't do what you do. I'm trying. I want to get to the point where I can do a bit more of this stuff by myself. I know you have people help you, but there are some people out there who literally do this all themselves, and those are like Those aren't wizards; those are deities.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, and for myself, is I I keep trying to learn something new each time, but I also realize too that there are probably certain ruts I'm going to start falling into because I've had no formal training.
Right.
And so that's another problem too. If you produce enough work that you don't want everything to start looking the same. And then, sometimes the designs you do are very sufficient and they work very well. But if you're wanting a certain type of feel for a certain type of project, times I realize, nope, I need somebody else and get my daughter involved or, something like that, because it's just, but it is all doable and all learnable and it's all affordable and people can choose to do what they want or don't want to do. It's, but the problem is sometimes is finding people, but the other thing is paying for it too. Cause obviously starting out, it's like, spending $500 for art is very difficult unless you're wanting to eat it. So you kind of want to work your way up to, it's like,
but I'll say this, I think that's one of the great things about that Kickstarter has done for this industry is it has lowered the barrier for entry significantly to allow, basically, if you have an idea and you're just willing to follow that passion and listen to a little bit of advice from people who might have been doing this a little bit longer, then you can go as far as you want to, because that's all I did.
Yeah, I think Kickstarter has made this all possible. I don't think the RPG hobby would be as healthy as it is at this moment without Kickstarter.
Yeah. Or at least crowdfunding in general.
Yeah, and I don't know there's any other crowdfunding that actually works to the level of Kickstarter.
Definitely not.
At least for the RPG projects, but yeah, it's definitely made it makes it work. And you could still produce without it. I mean, that doesn't stop you, but you're not going to get near the sales. You're not going to get near the eyeballs. Without the sales, you're not going to be able to afford the art. You're not going to be able to afford. I mean, but you can still produce stuff. There's nothing saying, it depends what you want out of the hobby or doing what you're doing.
Right.
If it's so I mean, one of the things I'd like to do is so like I for photography, I started with digital photography. I've never done black and white film. I haven't done any film photography. So it's kind of something I've missed out on, but it's kind of like saying with zines. Everything I've ever done has really just been through publisher, through InDesign. But it's like, I don't know, it'd be like to do it the old fashioned way.
Right.
And so maybe create a project just for doing that.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah. It's like, what would that look like? What would I need to do? It's like, so I think in my back of my mind, I'm looking for a future project. I don't know about what, but just to say, I'm going to, I'll probably pay somebody to use a typewriter, but at least somebody to type things out, mistakes and all.
That'd be awesome. Oh man. Oh, see, and that's cool right there. That's a cool little idea to just where's that gonna go? I'll be interested to see.
There are some people who have been doing some Dungeon 22 or 23, I should say, not 22. You know what I mean by Dungeon 23 projects? It's a dungeon a day for 2023. Or is it 20? Yeah, so they're supposed to do a dungeon a day
for the whole year of 2023.
Yeah, or dungeon they do like one room a day, and then at 365 days you have a mega dungeon.
Oh, holy cow! Yeah,
and some people have done variations of it, and I mean the idea is it's not meant to be to be dictated as far as thus it should be done, but a lot of the idea is as you're doing it is the original conceit, if I recall correctly, is to actually do it in a notebook and like a day planner or something like that. But it's like people doing that, it's like that's already partway there to lending where it's handwritten, could be, and sketchy, and it's like that is a very very fun format. And it'd be interesting to see if people start producing products that kind of have that feel.
Yeah, yeah. I've been wondering about that too. Because it definitely would be different, right? Like I had this thought, my parents got me this old, like one of those old like real or not real, but like replica like journals, like leather bound journals, and it's like wrapped up and you gotta like unwrap the leather from it, and then you gotta open it up and all the pages are like rough cut and they're just barely
Yeah.
in there. And so I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna write in this thing, but I was like, what if someone had one of these and they literally just went through and they wrote out like their own like crazy like black magic RPG game in this like tabletop RPG, and there was just one copy of it that existed, and it was like this crazy esoteric thing. I was like, that would not be very effective as selling tool, right? Because there's just one, but like it would be like this larger than life thing, you know? It'd be like this legendary mythical game. Like if you
Oh, right. It would work better. Yeah, it's the problem though is right. If you'd have to be famous enough that people would want it.
exactly, it
But
would have to be someone like Monty Cook or something that wrote it.
yeah, yeah, and I think it, and that's kind of, that's something, something I never really considered, the what do they call that, bespoke, I think is
Yeah, bespoke. Yeah,
the popular way of a popular term. But that's, taking it down quite a bit. But the idea that I wonder what sort of space a bespoke whatever would fit within,
hmm
you know like you may not want to do it for a whole like rule book, but you could do a 20-page dungeon.
sure. A 20-page and handwrite it all in little notebooks. So you could do a limited run of something like that, or even what you're talking about is of typing it out on a typewriter. That's pretty bespoke.
Have you seen Temple of the Blood Moth?
No, but that sounds like something I should see.
Yeah, this is not good for audio, but let's see if I can find it.
That's okay. I will fill the silence. He's very studiously rifling through his books. I have that same shirt.
Yeah, I must have it on a different shelf. So this fellow, you can get the PDF, and so he did it as like a college project.
Mm-hmm.
When I say college project, I think it was like, I don't know, it was like junior high, but it looks very typewritten, and it's a very great adventure. It's very well done, and Devin has a vibe, but it's kind of like he did this thing, was going to supposed to do something else, and then he just disappeared. And it's like he did this thing in college, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
Put it out there. Everybody loved it, and then who knows where he's at? He just maybe learned to play the oboe instead. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Like what happened? Just one of those people that's just like Sid Barrett. He came out and he's just like, I'm gonna write these amazing guitar songs, and come around for a couple of years, and then he just disappeared, just kind of wandered off to his garden in England, and nobody ever saw him again.
That's
And Pink Floyd just went on without.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. So there are some examples, and I think that we're kind of dealing with a lot of high production with the I mean super high production with Mork Borg.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of interesting to see. And even like the D&D, it's like it's kind of like Monty Cook. So for instance, I get some thoughts about doing a product for a Cipher System.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I look at the Cipher System book, it's a lot of color art.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm not going to have color art. Is that automatically going to, like, if I was to produce my own content, is that going to just immediately just turn people off, because like with 5e, it's like people are used to, color content there as well.
Right. And that is something that I've encountered definitely in 5e specifically is, I mean, if you look at our Kickstarter page, yeah, a lot of our custom art that we've used is color art, and it definitely looks like it's in line with what you would expect from 5e. But that's not necessarily my favorite style of art. It's not that I dislike it. I love it. I think all of our art looks awesome. Uh, but like for some of the GrymWyrd Tales, for example, I've used some like definitely some more retro black and white line art, more like AD&D style looking art for some of the adventures, because I also really dig that retro look. Some people definitely do not. And they don't believe that it belongs in modern D&D.
Right. And you can also say, the flip side too, where it's, where a lot of the old school, the preference, I think a lot of times is for black and white.
Yeah, when I see like really hyper detailed color flashy art in something that's being marketed as an indie game, I automatically kind of go into it with my hackles up like, what are you doing? I think you
Yeah, it's so, and the things too is, if you're going to spend, money, time and money to produce a product, you definitely don't want to just I don't want to say alienate, but whatever you have is alienated by the people who would be potential consumers. So it's like,
yeah. And that's kind of something that Zac and I have talked about, as we do these seminars at the conventions and stuff, where we talk about running Kickstarters. And it's, we talk about like, you need to know the product that you're selling. Like if you're selling an indie product, have artwork that backs up and speaks to that. If you're selling a 5e product, you need to have art that speaks to that. And this all needs to, falls in line with how you plan your budget and all that kind of stuff. If you're interested, you can come see the seminar if you want to know more. But all that to say, it definitely matters at the end of the day. And for the one of the things that I love about GrymWyrd, bringing it back around, is that we have it's mostly what you would expect from a 5e book. You're going to get a lot of that nice, clean Freddie Lopez art that you see all over the page. But then for the adventures themselves that are kind of front loaded towards the beginning of the book, they'll have some interesting pieces of artwork that are a little unusual for what people might expect for 5e. So I'm kind of happy for them to be forced to be exposed.
Well, and you are trying to push it to the more horror aspect. So I think that's pretty apropos too.
Yeah, and they do. I have found people are a little bit more forgiving in terms of horror than they would be than I've seen some of my colleagues be with trying to use this type of art for fantasy type stuff.
Oh, I know I was going to talk about. This is, maybe you're not quite the right person, but so earlier this, I think it was earlier this year, that World of Game Design announced. I probably should talk to Zac. I really want to talk to Zac about this, but announced the Hannibal RPG.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you definitely should. I can give you some details, but you want to talk to him for the full scoop on this.
No, but I mean, I was shocked by the amount of negativity put out by people. I don't know if you saw any of that.
Oh, I saw it. Yeah. Yeah, because I'm writing on it, so I saw it.
It's like, I even see it spill over into Twitter. I'm like, wow. Yeah. It's like,
yeah. Well, here's the thing. It's for people who, I guess just aren't fans of that show, because I don't know why, but just like any media franchise or any IP, I guess it's gonna have its detractors. And so there were just, like you're saying, there's a bunch of people being like, why does this even need to exist? It's like, why does any tabletop game need to exist? Because we want it to. Like, chill.
It was just utterly shocking. And somebody else like, this is just a blatant money grab. I'm like, there's no money grab. You pay a licensing fee.
Yeah,
pay royalty fees.
It's big. Like, if it's a money grab on our part, we're doing it wrong.
Yeah, because it's a fair amount of risk.
Yeah.
And so, but it went on, and different people. I was just, and I think one was, people talk. It's like, you know, to be honest, I don't know how you guys are going to pull this off. But in the end, it's
Deftly.
like, but but you know, but the thing is buy it and read it and see what if it succeeds. If it succeeds, it's going to push more games in certain directions and more mechanics, and it's like it's an invention.
Yeah,
If it works, then more cool stuff will come through.
exactly. And
If
my
it
whole thought is that, those people who are saying that, they were never going to buy it in the first place.
no.
So, you know, that's my whole thing is, just don't read the negative comments. And if you do, I'm glad John Christian was there. John Christian, he got out the Vorpal sword and
He
he went
did.
snicker snack on some of those guys. My wife officially gave him the title troll handler after that. Um, so I was, we were glad to have him around, but you're never going to see me engage in that kind of, I'm just not going to care. At the end of the day, those kinds of people, they're not going to buy my book anyway. So why am I'm not going to waste any time giving them a response.
No, no, no. But I've never seen it's not that everybody was, but I still had never seen any kind of reaction like that for
I know.
something that would just seem like why do you even care? Like why do you even care like why are you angry? That's why I couldn't
Yeah.
understand. It's like I can understand, like I can look at it and like I don't see how it's gonna work. Man, I'm not gonna bother. Like, but not enough for me to like post and badmouth
Right.
people.
Well, but it does come from a place of and John wasn't wrong when he said that they don't understand what they're talking about, right? Because like you just said, we had to pay a not very small licensing fee that, you know, not to give too much away, isn't just a one-time thing.
Right.
uh in order to be able to make this game. So it's like calling it a money grab was just kind of it just it shows, a lack of insight into how the inside of this industry actually works. And if you actually want to produce something that has a big name title attached to it, the kind of hoops that you have to jump through, there's a lot of them, and they get smaller and smaller and smaller the closer you get to the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, and in fact, one of the big ones, and I think people don't understand is the Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And it's FFG's. I believe it's done or about to be done, but people are like, well, I can't understand why, blah blah blah, or why you can. But it's like, it. I don't know what they're paying for Star Wars, but you pay a fee up front, and then I think you get. I think it's then you pay a percentage afterwards, but usually it's you don't pay anything until you reach a certain amount that you prepaid. But then after that, so like
As
they
far
could
as
be
I understand it, yeah.
yeah, so they could have paid like upfront. Let's say I don't know, I don't have no idea what maybe they paid $100,000, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's a 5% fee. So they pay $100,000, and then the first million, they don't pay anything, and after that it's a certain amount. But that license is only for like 3 years or 5 years or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. It's a negotiated time frame,
For
and
sure.
when that is up, um, it is not worth it for the so like generally for a person that's making the game. You've already extracted pretty much most of the money you're going to get out of that game, unless you're
Mm-hmm.
going to, because you're like, unless you create a core rule book, every supplement is less and less and less and less.
Sure.
And the in the person owning the copyright, they're not going to give you a discount because it's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So they have no interest in cheating, that value. So they're going to wait till somebody else offers it, and they'll do a new deal with a new company.
And there comes, second edition of
Yeah,
that IP,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, and so it's just like it's not necessarily anybody being so much greedy, but it's just like if a person owned that, if you own the rights to Star Wars, you wouldn't be just you know
Well, and let me ask this question, right? Like, what the reason that we're working on the Hannibal RPG is because Jared, as the leader of World of Game Design, came to us and he said, "Hey guys, what are some IPs that you guys would be interested in working on? And that was one of the ones that got mentioned. That was one of the ones that Zac mentioned, and as our creative director, it was available, they went in and they attacked it. But, had Ghostbusters been available and on the table and things like that, would people be saying the same thing? I don't know. Maybe. I can't know, but the reality is that at the end of the day, these are all IPs that are close to us and near and dear to our hearts in one way or another. And just because it's not your cup of tea, there are a million other tabletop RPGs out there that you do want to be made, that I can turn around and say, well, there's no reason that this should be made. You could just take this RPG and retrofit it and do this and this and this and this, and you could have your kit. And I'm like, or I could just make the thing,
Yeah, I think that's the ugly side of middle-aged white men. Now that I am one.
Yeah,
like,
one of them anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Like, really, kids got my porch. Like, really? Like, I just find it astounding of all the millions of things to find joy and happiness in the hobby that is just abundant, more abundant than ever before. I mean, it is just an abundance of riches, and people will pick something and gripe. It's just like, it's just nuts.
Man, that's just, if that's not the definition of first world problems.
Yes. Well,
why are they making a Hannibal RPG?
It's just wrong. It's just wrong.
So wrong.
That's what's wrong with this world.
glorifying that man. Yeah. And then someone got confused, and this was a very good question, and I laughed so hard at this because this person was probably so confused, and I wanted to be that person for half a second, because they commented, why did they make Hannibal sexy? But it's the thing with Will Graham. It's Will Graham in the mask. They were like, why did they make Hannibal sexy? I'm like, that's not Hannibal, but I wish that I want to be in that mindset for just a minute, wondering, oh my gosh, why did they pick this actor to play Hannibal Lecter? But it wasn't. It's Mads Mikkelsen's great take on the character, and I'm really glad I can say that we do get to use. I'm pretty sure we get to use their likenesses for the book, which is excellent.
Yeah, and that's what's kind of interesting, where you have a property that also has is another media, and sometimes what you can and can't use. So it's like you can. I can't remember what it was, but you can use things from the book, but you can't use anything from the movies. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of, the whole thing, right? Again, with all those hoops that you have to jump through, like, aside from all the, the licensing fees and all those things, you have to negotiate like what parts of the property you can actually use, for your game. And it's a lot of, there are lots of lawyers involved, and lots of contracts and all this kind of stuff that is way above my pay grade, that I just got to hear about secondhand, as an excited person who gets to write for this.
So have you ever seen Buckaroo Banzai?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's and I never use this term, but I'll use it now. There's a douchebag that's sitting on the rights of that.
Really?
Yeah, and I think he's supposed to come out with an RPG, but never has. But it's like somehow this is what's problem. Some people can I don't know what the term is, but they can get an option and they'll just sit on it, and then nothing moves forward. So we could have had, Buckaroo Banzai RPG.
I would love that,
but no, we don't, or we'll never get it, because you just.
Hey, same with Toe Jam and Earl, man.
With what?
Toe Jam and Earl. If you're any 90s kids out there who love Sega, we will never have a Toe Jam and Earl tabletop RPG, sadly, probably.
So why is that? What is
same
Toe
kind
Jam
of
and
issue.
Earl?
Toe Jam and Earl is like a roguelite style game for the Sega Genesis back in the day, about these two aliens that crash land on quote unquote Earth, but really Earth is just a series of weird platforms out in space with devils and ice cream trucks and people mowing their lawns. It's a very, very strange game, but one that I think would make a very fascinating tabletop role-playing game if someone could ever get their hands on the rights to it. Someone figure that out.
Toe Jam and Earl.
Yes. Toe Jam and Earl. I need it.
I think that's a good note to end on, is Toe Jam and Earl.
Perfect.
Well, thanks for joining me, Zach. I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me. Thanks so much.
Yeah, but have you back on again sometime.
Absolutely. Hopefully we can get even more off trail.
Yeah, it is possible. It's not even really hard.
Yeah, no, especially I think the two of us probably get lost in the woods for a couple days.
Yes, exactly. So anyway, you take care and thanks again for joining me.
Absolutely. We'll see you, Jeff.